my usual process is to start out with a lot of enthusiasm, get bogged down a little bit in the middle, but keep going on it until I get to the place where I think this is a piece of junk. This isn't going anywhere. Why am I even wasting my time on it? And I have two choices at that point. I can throw it out, which I don't want to do because I'm too frugal to throw out all that fabric, never mind the time I put into it. Or I can just leave it up on the design wall and maybe do something else for a while and then come back to it. And once I get past that, this is a piece of absolute junk, then it all falls into place, and I'm usually happy with it when I get it done. But I have to get through that this is terrible stage first. You do that often enough, you get used to it, you know it's going to happen, and you just, keep going. I think I was attracted to quilt making partly because I love to shop for fabric. And after a while, I'd gathered enough fabric that I really couldn't justify going into the store and looking at any more until I started doing something with it. Another thing that really interested me at the beginning was the fact that I was able to do something for other people in the family. I was able to make something for them. I found an art form that I was actually able to do. I can't draw with a pencil. A friend told me once she could teach anyone to draw, and she decided I was the exception to the rule. I just can't draw. But I can take a pair of scissors and draw with the scissors and get the shape I want. Or I can run something through the sewing machine or sew it by hand and get the lines that I'm looking for. So I think that for me it was finding the particular art form that worked. When I felt that I was absolutely no good at art at all, when I started working with fabric, I found out that there were things I could do, and I just love it. Again, it's something that you can do for someone else. He loves it because it reminds him of his travels in Africa. He spent quite a bit of time there on his job. My colors talk to me, absolutely. Sometimes they scold me, sometimes they urge me on. They often kind of coerce me into trying something I wouldn't have done myself. I remember one of the first classes that I took at the Asilomar Conference Center down in Monterey, California. And there were about 20 of us in the class, and the teacher went around critiquing everybody's work. And I had been quilting, maybe 3-4 years at that point. And I was using very conservative turquoise and lavender colors, things that I know would look good together. And she came to my work and she said, Janet, that looks really good, but what would happen if you put a little orange in there? And I thought, orange in my beautiful turquoise and lavender quilt. This one is the one that I did after the teacher told me I should use a little bit of orange. So that's got all orange in it now.
You're wearing orange today. Is that deliberate?
No. I spent some time on the island of Iona in Scotland, off the coast of Scotland, and got very interested in the Celtic traditions there, the Celtic religions. And so I made this Celtic cross, or Celtic design quilt for that. And everyone else was taking pictures of the whole tulip fields, and I was down on my hands and knees with my little point-and-shoot camera, getting as close as I could possibly get to the flowers without them being totally blurred. And I made this quilt from the inside of the tulip. This is another one of just trying to say, the sun is coming up this morning, and yes, there are a lot of problems in the world, but the sun is coming up today. And I have that hanging in the living room from time to time. So she wanted a quilt that would say something about music to her, but she didn't want a cello on it, and she didn't want something just traditional, just something that would say music to her. So I thought, what better than over my head I hear music in the air. Again, no matter how bad things get, there's music in the air if we listen for it. So that's this one. The one on the wall in the living room that I particularly love is my Sea Ranch quilt. That just reminds me of how fortunate I was to spend 17, 18 years in that beautiful place. Needle felting. You've seen the three-dimensional things that are done. This is something that was just two-dimensional. This is all needle felted, and then I put the quail on it because, again, that's the one thing I miss, I think, from the Sea Ranch more than anything else, are the quail in the backyard. Years ago, after my mother-in-law died, in cleaning out her house, we found one piece of fabric that had a baby layette on it. And it had embroidery on it. It was partly embroidered, but not all the way. I couldn't throw it away, and I saved it for years. I'm assuming, I don't know, but I'm assuming that my mother-in-law started making it when my husband was, before he was born, and never got it finished. So I hung on to it for years because I just couldn't part with it, but I wasn't about to finish it for anybody. And then I decided I would make a baby quilt, and I would put those pieces on it to kind of honor the work that she had done and the expectation that she had before her child was born. And so I added the pieces, and then just to give a little more interest to it, I put on 3 photographs that I copied onto fabric. One was Bob and his mother, one was Bob as a toddler, and one was Bob sitting on his dad's lap. So that's a very personal quilt. But most of the quilts I do have a personal element to them. I'm either trying to tell a story or express an emotion or something in my quilts. And see, balance. I guess balance is the key word that I live with. So one of the things I do in quilts is try to present a more positive picture, try to do something that gives the person looking at it a bit of a lift. Quilting can be very solitary. Most of the work that I do here in my studio by myself. But there's also a very community-oriented aspect to it. We have a very strong quilting group here at Panorama. And quilters are always so happy to help one another, to share ideas, share equipment, share fabrics. And we also, along with doing our own work, we do an awful lot for the community. We share our work just everywhere. Here at Panorama, we do quilts for the CNR. We do quilts for the Seattle Children's Hospital, and many of us on our own do other quilts for various organizations. We love to give away our work. And I remember as a child going over to see their quilts and watch them quilting, and it fascinated me. I was the first one in our family in my generation to get married, and this woman gave me a stainless steel Lazy Susan for a wedding present. All of my cousins and my brother, who were married after I was, got quilts from her. And she thought Janet wouldn't want one of those things, but I was always resentful that I didn't have one of Helen's quilts when everyone else did. So stubborn person that I am, I decided I'd make my own. And once I got started, there was no stopping me. A day without quilting is a wasted day. I would recommend that children start doing art from the time they can hold a pencil or a crayon in their hand, and that they be encouraged to do it. I think one of the saddest things is how many people, like me, were given the impression at some point that they couldn't do art, that they were not artistic, and they spent their whole life not doing art. Art is many things. Art can be music, it can be theater, it can be writing, it can be poetry, it can be painting, it can be pottery, it can be fabric. But I think it's just so important for every child to somewhere be able to experiment with enough different ideas that they will come to see what it is right for them, and then do it. It's so easy to say, I will do that someday when I retire, or I really would love to quilt, but I don't have time to do it right now. And I think the answer to that is you'll never have time to do it unless you just get in there and do it. And sometimes my house stays dirty, and sometimes I throw together something to eat because I haven't had time to cook. But I've worked on my quilting and I feel good. I usually don't even know what size the piece is going to be. Many quilters have a pattern drawn that's exactly what they want to do, and they know exactly where they're going with it. And I work that way occasionally, where I will sometimes start with a small drawing or a picture of something, usually my own photograph, and have it enlarged. If you go to a copy shop, you can have it enlarged to any size you want. So I'll have it enlarged to a full size. And then I will take that full-size drawing and change it. I'll put a piece of tracing paper over it, and using that as an idea, I will change it, shape it the way I want it. Then I'll make a couple of copies of that, and one of them I would then glue onto a piece of tag board, and I would cut it apart and label each piece and make patterns and cut my pieces of fabric out and sew them to the, and make sure that it's exactly the way the thing. But that's kind of tedious, and there are times when that's what I want to do. If I want a particular curved line, there's just no way to get it other than drawing the patterns and putting in the registration marks and making sure that you sew it exactly right and treating yourself to a piece of chocolate when you get it done just right. And then started working more toward the art quilts. But I've taken classes. I have paid a lot of attention to what other people were doing, not to copy them, but just to be inspired by them. And once in a while now I'll go back to doing a traditional quilt because I love being part of that process. But for the most part, it's off-the-wall stuff. I'll see a picture somewhere that I like, and if it's my own photograph, that's easy. But if it's someone else's, I'm very aware of copyright infringement problems. So if I use someone else's picture in a quilt, I'm very careful to make sure that when I get done, my quilt doesn't look anything at all like the picture. I will see a picture of something and think, oh, I want to do a quilt of that. By the time I'm done, I've used some of the same colors, or I might have used part of the shape, but it bears almost no resemblance to the original piece. Or other times, I'll have a piece of fabric that I just love, and I'll look at that for a long time until the fabric kind of tells me what it wants to do, and then I'll just work from starting with the fabric. So I don't have just one way of working. It just, whatever comes to me. Often it's just taking a walk and seeing colors or something outside that fascinate me, or seeing a flower or a leaf, and I'll come back and try to do something with it. I drank the tea, dried the tea bag, cut it open, and took the tea out of it and used the tea bag as a quilt. It was beautiful patterns that the tea leaves had left on the bags. And I put them together, used a gel medium to make them adhere and not fall apart. It was great fun.